We're going to be looking at hope today. So as we continue in our Advent season, we are now at hope. That's our fourth candle that we have lit this morning. And as we look at hope, we're going to go to a place that you probably didn't think we were going to go to this morning, the book of Ruth. And I know that may sound a little strange, but I think you'll see why we're going there when we go there. So if you'll turn, it's right after the book of Judges. So right after Judges, right before 1 Samuel, you'll find the 4 chapters of the book of Ruth. Very, very short book of the Bible, but a wonderful book of the Bible, as I think you will soon see as we get into the sermon this morning. Let me pray for us as we start. Father, we love you, and as we look at hope this morning, we understand that truly hope comes from you, an unfailing hope. And Lord Jesus, we know that hope is secure because of what you have accomplished for us on the cross. And so as we look this morning and as Christmas we think about your birth, help us to never forget that true hope comes from your not only birth, but your death and your resurrection. And so help us this morning to think about hope in our lives, maybe the hopes and the dreams that we have. And how oftentimes they're not fulfilled in the way that we want them to be. But while those may not always be fulfilled, our hope is secure. Our hope is anchored, Lord Jesus, in who you are and what you have done for us. And your purposes will always stand true. And your purposes are almost always so much better and greater than our own. And so help us to see that clearly this morning as we look at your word. So in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I've done a lot of traveling over the last 20 years or so. I did a lot of traveling throughout the United States when I worked with Summit Ministries. But we've also done a lot of traveling as a family. And when we lived in Colorado, a lot of that traveling had to do with Interstate 70, which cuts right across the middle of the United States, going east to west. I don't know if you have ever had the joy and the pleasure of being on I-70, going through Kansas and, Reisner's, and Missouri. Actually, I don't mind it. A lot of people don't like I-70, especially going through Kansas, because they think it's so boring. I actually like it. I like it a lot, because it's just wide open and you can see forever. I mean, literally places you can see miles. And you can just kind of relax and think and enjoy the trip. And so I-70 is one of those interstates, like so many interstates in the United States, that for long, long stretches you can see where you're going. There are no surprises. And so that's the way it was for us. On our travels, we would hit I-70 and we would know. We would know that, well, when we get here, especially if we left early in the morning, when we get to Lyman, we're going to grab breakfast, okay? Everyone will be up by then, and we'll grab some breakfast. When we get to Salina, that's where we'll stop, and we'll have to fill up with gas and maybe get a snack or something like that. We had our plan. And for the most part, it was pretty uneventful. Our trips were whether we were going to Arkansas, Rogers, Arkansas, or whether we were going to South Carolina, which was a 24-hour trip back. It was pretty uneventful. We knew where we were going, we knew what we needed to do, and we had our plan for getting there. And there were a couple of times during those trips where we had unexpected detours. One, we were going through Topeka, Kansas, and our brakes gave out, and we had to stop and get a brake replacement job done on our van. Another time, our, some big thing on our engine. Head gasket, that's it. It actually went out. And so we had to stop every few hundred miles or every 100 miles or so and fill our radiator up with gas just so we could make it to South Carolina. And so, what did I say? Gas? that would not have been good. That would have caused more issues. So anyway, we stopped, we filled it up with water, we got to South Carolina. And then, aside here, okay, very quickly. If you ever have a busted head gasket, go to Advance Auto and get this $6 stuff called radiator seal, and you pour it in your radiator, and it goes through and it seals up all the cracks. And I did that, and it fixed our van. And we drove it for many, many years afterwards. That's just an aside. That's free. All right. So anyway, for the most part, they were uneventful, right? Now, we would love for our lives to be like this, wouldn't we? Where we have our lives planned out and we can see ahead and we have our plans and we know what's ahead of us and we have our plans for things that are coming up and we know how we're going to handle those. We have our plans for our job and our family and our home and our vacations. We have our plans and we have our goals and we have our hopes for how all of these things are going to turn out. And we can deal with the occasional breakdown, right? We can deal with the occasional time where we need to kind of take a detour off of our plan for our life, as long as it's just an occasional detour. But we like to get back to our plan as quickly as possible, back on our way down the highway of life. But life is not like this, by and large. Life is more like the roads you find here in Virginia. All right? And I've been out to some of your homes that live on the outer parts of Albemarle County. And going to those homes, it can get pretty hairy at times. Where you're going along and there's hairpin curves, and then all of a sudden it's rainy and it's foggy, and then all of a sudden a deer jumps out in front of you. Well, that's more like what our life is like. We can have all of our plans. We can have all of our hopes and our dreams, how we would like for things to play out if we could write the script. Thing is, we're not the authors. And that's something that I really want us to understand this morning. We are not the authors of our life. We like to think we are, and we're okay with God editing here and there, but let us control the main storyline, God. That's all I ask. Now, He does give us a ridiculous amount of control over our lives, doesn't He? Now, what I mean by that is He does not dictate every decision, every single decision that we make in our lives. We make some good choices and we make some bad choices. He gives us desires that we can pursue, our passions, and He wants us to pursue those, and we do pursue those. He gives us the ability to build upon the gifts and abilities that He has given to us, that He has endowed us with, and that is a wonderful thing. So, in reality, we have a ridiculous amount of control over our life. And I heard a guy say that one time. We have a ridiculous amount of control of our lives, and it just kind of stuck with me. Because while we believe and truly God is sovereign over all things, He allows us to make the choices in our lives. He allows us to go down the paths that we believe we should be going down, and so forth. We have hopes and dreams. And we pursue those hopes and dreams, right? But we have to remember the whole time, as we pursue our passions, as we pursue our hopes and our dreams, that while we think we are writing our story the way that we want to write it, God is still the one that holds the pen. And God is still the one that has the power to edit as He sees fit. I was at Starbucks this past week and had a great conversation with a gentleman. I don't want to necessarily call him a friend yet, although we're moving in that direction. We've had quite a few conversations, so a good acquaintance. And he is an author, and he's published 4 novels now. And so when I see him in there, we say hi to one another and kind of pleasantries, and every once in a while we'll get into a little deeper conversation. Well, this past week was one of those weeks where we did, and it was really fascinating. He's a fascinating gentleman. And he talked about kind of his style of writing, and he says, I have a beacon out there. So I look forward, and I have this beacon to where I know I want my story to go. As I start this novel, this is where I'm going. And he said, then I start creating my characters. And he said, the characters, they just kind of go here and there. And he said, he kind of used this kind of terminology. And I allow them to. I allow my characters to kind of take on a life of their own. And he said, you would think I'm the author, so I can dictate how they do this or that and that type of thing. He said, but my authors, I allow them to kind of make the choices. And when they make this choice, it's going to go this way for a while. Then it comes back this way for a while. But I know ultimately I'm going to get them back to the beacon, to what my main point is for this story and where I want to go. And I was literally sitting there writing this sermon, and we're talking. And so I start thinking more about the sermon, and I think, okay, God is like that in some ways. It's not a perfect analogy, but in a lot of ways He is, because God has His ultimate purpose, right? God has His ultimate purpose, His ultimate outcome. What is His ultimate outcome? Ultimately, all things are going to be consummated in the Lord Jesus Christ. When He returns, all things will be made new. There will be a new heavens and new earth. That is the ultimate. And we will be in relationship with Him. We will be with Him in His presence for all eternity after that. So that's kind of big picture, ultimate beacon out there. That's where we're heading. And God allows us to make choices. Go here, go there. But there are times when He needs to take a corrective measure. Because for His purpose ultimately to be fulfilled in the way that He sees best, absolutely best, He needs to do something in our lives. And sometimes that something in our lives isn't very pleasant to go through. It can oftentimes hurt. Maybe it's a dream or a hope that we have, a hope of the way that our lives are going to go, a hope of a way a relationship is going to go, a hope for our children or our marriage or whatever it may be, and it just doesn't turn out that way. And we kind of think, even if we don't say it, isn't this a bummer? And we don't take it to the next level and say, but why is this happening, God? It's really, really hard, but why is it happening? And I know you have an ultimate purpose in this, but this is really hard, so I need you now to help me through this. Now, I say all that to kind of get us back to the book of Ruth. Because the book of Ruth is up and down. I mean, there's a lot of setbacks in the book of Ruth. These 4 short chapters, there's a lot of setbacks. And I bet Naomi, from this book of Ruth, found herself oftentimes feeling like we feel. Where she had this roadmap, right? She had a husband, she had 2 sons, she had a plan for her future. This is the way it was going to play out. She's going down the interstate, and the next thing you know, there's a famine in Judea, in Bethlehem where they live. So they have to move to the country of Moab, a foreign country. She has to move there with her husband and with her 2 boys, and they have to start a new life there because of the famine. And all of a sudden, this is a detour. This is not something that she had planned on happening in her life. But yet here she is. But then all of a sudden, what happens? Her husband dies. Her 2 sons, who have taken Moabite wives, the 2 sons die after 10 years. And after 10 years of being married, she does not have a grandchild. So I'm sure at this point, Naomi is thinking, what in the world, Lord? What is going on here? This isn't what I hoped for. This isn't what I dreamed. So instead of her being on this straight, narrow road where she can kind of see what's going on and she could plan for things, she can have contingencies for when things happen, all of a sudden she finds herself on the back roads of Virginia trying to figure out, where in the world am I? And how do I get out of here? Recently, I was introduced to a book by Larry Crabb called Shattered Dreams, which dealt a lot with the book of Ruth. And I was also introduced to a few of John Piper's articles where he looks at hope, and he looks at it in the context of the book of Ruth as well. And I really hadn't thought about Ruth in that way before, not in depth. I've studied Ruth, I've gone through the Old Testament surveys, and you kind of look at the main themes and that type of thing. But to really sit down and look at a really thoughtful study of Ruth, I was able to do that this past week, and it was wonderful. It was fantastic. And I hope you'll see by the time we're done here how Ruth really is, a theme of Ruth is one of hope. It's one of no matter what is happening in our lives, no matter how much our life is derailed, no matter how often we find ourselves getting off to get something fixed, God has a purpose in that, even though we can't see it right then and there. And even though we may find ourselves getting really angry and upset, ultimately, God does have a purpose. So both of these resources were timely because here we are in the Advent season, and here we are talking about hope. And so you will hear a little bit of Larry Crabb coming up every once in a while, and you'll hear a little bit of Piper maybe once or twice as well as we get into the book of Ruth. Now, there are 3,000 years that separate us from these characters, from this story, and where we are today. The events and the people, about 3,000 years. But the yearnings that we read about in this book are the same. To live a hoped-for life. But the hope-for life is most often not the best life. Not from God's perspective, anyway. So again, like I said, the story of Ruth is a series of setbacks, so let's get into that. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of summarize a lot of things for you, okay? And I would encourage you, if you have never read the book of Ruth, or if it's been a long time since you read the book of Ruth, I want to encourage you to read it. I mean, it literally takes 15 minutes to read the book of Ruth. It's a really short book, but it's fantastic. So here we are in chapter 1, and I've already talked about that a little bit, right? Naomi and her husband and 2 sons are forced out of Bethlehem, out of Judea because of famine, so they go to Moab, to a foreign land, and it's there that she loses her husband, she loses her 2 sons, she is left with 2 daughters, daughter-in-laws. Well, Naomi is upset, of course, and she sees this as being a sentence from God upon her. And so she tells her daughter-in-law that in such a way. She says, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I sons in my womb that they may become your husbands?" So if she is giving her daughter-in-laws freedom to leave. "Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say that I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. For it is exceedingly bitter to me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So here is Orpah, one of the daughter-in-laws, and she has decided, okay, I'm going to go back to my people. But Ruth clings to her. And I love what Ruth says to her as she clings to her, because Naomi has made her feelings clear. Listen, God's hand is against me. You don't want to have anything to do with me. You need to leave now. But this is what Ruth says. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, for there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth is committed to Naomi. And so, of course, Naomi says, okay, we will go back to my home together. And so that's what they do. And in chapter 2, we have them returning to Bethlehem. And we have Ruth meeting Boaz. And Boaz is a really interesting character in the sense of where he comes from. And I just forgot my name. Okay, here we go. Yep, there we go. Rahab, I couldn't remember Rahab's name. Rahab, who of course was the prostitute who, when Joseph sent the spies in to Jericho, she is the prostitute. And some people want to make that a little softer and say, well, she maybe wasn't a prostitute. No, she was. From all indications, she was. And she helped the spies when they came in. And because of that, Joshua said, your life will be spared and the life of those that you love, your family, and so forth. And so indeed, when they came in and they overtook the city, what did they do? They took her and they redeemed her. They redeemed Rahab. They redeemed her family. What I mean by that, they saved them. They did not allow them to perish with the others. And so they take her with them. And she ultimately marries a man named Salmon, who was one of the spies that went in. And it's Salmon and Rahab, whose grandson is now before us in the scriptures, Boaz. That's who he is. And so God redeemed a prostitute, a Gentile prostitute, brought her into the nation of Israel, had her marry Salmon, an upstanding, godly, righteous man. And it's through their offspring that we now have Boaz here before us. So Boaz comes on the scene, and he meets Ruth. And he makes it clear that he has noticed her. There evidently was something about her spirit, very well could have been something about her looks, that made Boaz take a second look her way. And he said, now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor. So she's hoping here, anyway, that she will find favor. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field and after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eye be on the field and that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? So already they have just met, and he has shown incredible favor upon Ruth. He says, listen, go with the other women. Why? So she'll be protected. Don't go to other fields where other men are. You're not going to be safe there. You go with these women, and you go in this field, and I've already instructed the men to not touch you. So already we're starting to see his favor upon Ruth. And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law, since the death of your husband, has been fully told to me, a woman of high, upstanding character, and he has heard this. And how you left your father and mother and your native land, and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. So we see, of course, he has shown favor to her. And Ruth goes back and she relates this story to Naomi. And Naomi, of course, sees instantly the possibilities here. And so I think it's at this moment that hope is rekindled in Naomi. I don't know this for a fact. I mean, Scripture doesn't tell us clearly what her state of mind was and what her attitude was. But to go through what she had gone through, and she had already said that there was a bitterness there because the hand of the Lord was against her. Was that continuing? Was she getting over that? Was it growing stronger in her? Well, we don't know, again, because Scripture doesn't tell us clearly. But here we have a moment where all of a sudden there's a glimmer of hope. Maybe we're not going to suffer for the rest of our lives. Maybe there is a possibility that indeed we can be redeemed, meaning that someone can take care of us. And so understanding that Boaz is a relative of Elimelech, her deceased husband, she says, I have a plan here, a plan, and this may work. So listen to me closely. And so what she tells her to do is to, after they are done in the fields and that type of thing, is to wait for Boaz to eat and drink. And then evidently this was a custom for them to go sleep at the foot of their barley piles. And he's going to go to sleep at the foot of his barley pile. And when he does this, Ruth, this is what I need you to do. I want you to go in and you are to uncover his feet and you are to lay at his feet. And so she does this. So this is kind of the moment, right? Either Boaz is going to wake up and look down there and say, what are you doing, woman? Get out of my barley field. Get out of my my building. Or he's going to say, I'm glad you're here. Let's talk some more. Thankfully, we see the latter happening here. He doesn't reject her, but instead something beautiful happened. He realized what her thoughts and what her motives were in doing this. He had already shown favor to her, so we know what his thoughts and his feelings were toward her. And so here we have these coming together, where she is at his feet. He wakes up and he sees her and he receives her at that moment. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as the mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of his heap of grain. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer." So, can you imagine Ruth hearing this? Excited? To see that he has not rejected me. That he has said that indeed he is my redeemer. And what does this mean? It means that he is a kinsman of Elimelech, and he has the ability to, yes, purchase the land that was Elimelech's and to indeed take care of them. And what this meant was ultimately marrying Ruth. So he has agreed, I will do these things. I will purchase the land. I will marry you. And I could just see Ruth just getting excited and just thinking, I can't wait to tell Naomi. But then he says this, "Yet there is a Redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." Now, can you imagine what kind of fitful sleep she had after that? This man had already told her, I will do these things. I will purchase the land. I will marry you. He didn't say it exactly, but that's what that meant by him being the Redeemer, the kinsman Redeemer. He would indeed marry her. And she knew that. But what? There's someone else? There's someone else closer in relationship who has the ability to do this instead? Okay. So her hopes are there once again, but are they going to be dashed? What's going to happen here? What is this kinsman going to say? So she goes back the next morning and she tells Naomi, and Naomi says, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." I think she understands Boaz has fallen for her daughter-in-law. And Boaz is going to do whatever he can to work this situation out. But Boaz is an honorable man. He is going to do what the law requires, what custom requires, and so that's exactly what he does. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, but in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people, if you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Can you imagine how Boaz felt at that moment? Well, let me tell you what that means. If you do redeem the land of Elimelech, this is what it means for you, okay? The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Do you see what just happened here? The way has been cleared. Hopes rise, hopes dashed. Hopes rise, hopes dashed. Hopes rise once again, and they are fulfilled. So they go through and they have this custom where they make an agreement and one takes off a sandal and hands it to the other when it says, okay, done deal. Boy, it wouldn't be nice. Wouldn't it be nice if that was that easy today? Are we in agreement? Here's a shoe. All right. So here we are, and the deal has been made. Then all the people who were at the gate, verse 11, then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this woman. The offspring that the Lord will give you by this woman. Do they know something that Ruth doesn't know? Have they just proclaimed a blessing upon her, some kind of prophetic blessing that they knew something? Because remember, Ruth and Naomi, one of Naomi's sons, had already been married for 10 years, and there were no children. Is there a guarantee that now that Ruth is marrying Boaz, that they will have children? Again, a possible hope that may not be fulfilled. A possible dream that will never come to fruition. But we do know that indeed they got married. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Notice how much Naomi is being talked about here. And we skipped a lot in this book that dealt specifically with Naomi and what she said and so forth. But here in this last chapter, in this last part of the last chapter, where a child has come, who are they focusing on? They're not focusing on Ruth. Oh, Ruth, you have your own child. You and Boaz are so blessed. They look to Naomi. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Isn't it interesting that so much attention is focused on Naomi here? And I think it's for good reason. Because as we go back and we look at the beginning of this chapter, or beginning of the book rather, and we see how her life started out with a husband and 2 sons and 2 daughter-in-laws, and she had her whole life before her, and I'm sure she had her plans and how she thought things were going to work out, how she hoped things were going to work out. But then her life goes off the rails completely. And it's nothing like she expected. And there's a bitterness in her because she believes the hand of the Lord is against her. But she returns to Bethlehem, and now we start to see things coming together. And ultimately, we see this new child born that she holds here in her lap. Remember what she says in 121, Do not call me Naomi when she returns to Bethlehem. Call me Mara. Mara means bitterness. Naomi means pleasantness. She says, Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. But God shows that He brought her back empty for a greater purpose. A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of who? David. Through her shattered hopes, he brings forth ultimately the hope of the world. This one event didn't take away the pain and the suffering Naomi had gone through, nor did it take away the pain of missing her husband and sons, but it did help alleviate some of the hurt and bitterness as she realized God had a greater plan for her than the ones she once held to. Naomi did not have the advantage that we have today, right? We can look back at this book and we can read in 15 minutes about Naomi's life and what God was doing in that time. How he was working through her suffering, how he was working through her pain, and what came out of that, a blessing that would be a blessing to the world. We see God's plan clearly. But what if God had gone to Naomi when she is sitting there in that chair with a child on her lap and said, go into your imagination a little bit, okay, because this is God talking to Naomi. Naomi, I know it has been hard. I know the hopes and the dreams you had for your family. You have gone through uncertain times where you didn't like me very much. Yes, I heard you. I know what you said. But here's why. The child you now hold will be the grandfather of a man named David, a man after my own heart who will be the greatest king Israel will ever know until his descendant comes who will sit on David's throne forever, who will be the King of kings and Lord of lords, who will destroy the power of sin and death once and for all. And he will give people an eternal hope. Now, what if God went on after telling her that, and maybe he explained a little bit more fully of who Jesus is, more fully of what this meant for Christ to come, for God to become incarnate, for him to die for us. Maybe he explains more to her. But now what if he said this to her? But Naomi, if you would like, I have the power to go back and change the past. I can give you back your husband and 2 sons. I can give you back the hopes and dreams you had when they were alive. Would you like for me to do that? I can just hear her say, and I think you can hear her with me, no, Lord. Now I see. Your way is better. It was always better. There was a missionary that we heard about a few months ago, maybe a year or so ago, who believed, he was from Australia, and he believed that he had been called to be a missionary. This particular island nation, it was Muslim, predominantly Muslim. And so he was engaged to be married. He had plans. He had hopes and dreams, but he felt called. No, this is what God is calling me to. Well, the fiancée, she wasn't on board with that. So he said, well, I have to go. So he goes, and he goes to this country to become a missionary. And not long after being there, they discover why he's there. He's there to be a missionary. He's a Christian. Well, this is a Muslim nation. We're not going to allow you to do that. And so they're going to send him out. They're going to deport him. He's not going to be able to stay. But while he is there, he's evidently in a jail for a short period of time. While he is there, he has a shirt. I believe it was a shirt, a banana, and a Bible. And while he's there, he meets this young lady who is there by no fault of her own. She's a Muslim young lady who has been raped. And because she's raped, she is in this jail. He meets her. He's about to leave, and he says, well, listen, just take this. He doesn't really have a conversation with her or anything like that. He just hands her this stuff and says, here. So she's a shirt, a banana, and a Bible. She's Muslim. So she's sitting there. This person leaves. He goes on. And she's sitting there, and she says, what in the world? Why am I in this jail? I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she has certainly lost hope. Maybe she puts on the shirt. Maybe she eats the banana. And she's looking at this book, and she said, well, I have nothing to lose. Everything has been taken from me. What worse can happen? So she opens up this Bible, and she starts reading this Bible. she comes to faith in Jesus. Well, after some time, she gets out of jail. And she starts ministering. And she has this amazing ministry now, right now. And she is going out and she is speaking. And hundreds of thousands of people are being blessed by her ministry. And about 7 years after this event took place, she was speaking at a conference. And she related this story of what happened, of this man and what this man had done for her and given to her. And after the conference, this man comes up to her and he says, "Praise God, I heard you today. I'm the man who gave you those things." He says, "Honestly, since that day, I haven't been really living for the Lord as far as on mission for Him. I'm still a believer, but I've had such doubts because I couldn't understand it. I knew that God had called me to be a missionary. I knew that God had called me to that country, and yet I go there and I'm rejected and I'm thrown out. And ever since then, for 7 years, I've been thinking, Lord, why? Why would you make that so clear to me and then nothing?" And here I am 7 years later, and I see exactly why God did that. I see exactly why God had called me. Exactly why all of these hopes and dreams I had, not only of being married and those types of things, why those didn't come fulfilled, but then this dream that I had of going to this country and being a minister of the gospel and seeing people come to Christ, why that hope was shattered. Because He had me there for one purpose, and that was to meet you. Now that doesn't always happen, does it? Things happen in our life. Things don't go our way. Hopes and dreams are shattered, and we are left picking up the pieces wondering, God, why? Now in His grace, sometimes He shows us why, as He did in the case of this missionary. Oftentimes, He doesn't. But whether He shows us or not, brothers and sisters, we have to remember that in the midst of our broken dreams, of our hopes that have been shot down, God is working. There's nothing random in our lives. God is working in the good, and He's working in the bad. Larry Crabb said this: "Our shattered dreams, hopes, are never random. They are always a piece in a larger puzzle, a chapter in a larger story." And then to add to that, from myself, a brushstroke and an eternal masterpiece. The book of Ruth is example 1a that God's purpose for this life of His people is to connect us to something greater than ourselves. Not that He's a killjoy and doesn't want us to have what we hope for. He desires but He desires to change us in such a way that our highest hopes are for His plans to move forward, for His name to be glorified, even if that means our personal hopes and dreams aren't realized. Because oftentimes broken hopes and dreams often awaken our appetite to know Him more. That's what Larry Crabb says in his book, and I think that's right on. Broken hopes and dreams often awaken our appetite to know Him more, to make Him known, and a zeal for His purposes over our own. The hope symbolized by a grandson sitting in his grandmother's lap points us forward to the hope found in a baby lying in a manger a millennium later. A baby who was born to parents whose world had been turned upside down. Think about it. Think about the fact that Mary, from the angel, understood that she was going to be giving birth to the Messiah. Joseph's world had been turned down because he had hopes and dreams of marrying this woman, Mary, and their first child, their first son, was not going to be his. That's a paradigm shift for Joseph. Those are some hopes and dreams that aren't going to be fulfilled, that he has to kind of work through right now. But through those shattered dreams, a better hope comes forth. This hope is not wishful thinking, but rather the hope that we have in Christ is the confident expectation. And if you remember from last year, I gave you this, a sure certainty. A sure certainty that what God has promised in His Word is true, has occurred, and or will occur in accordance with His sure Word. That's where true hope comes from. Hoping in Him. Because our hopes and dreams, our personal hopes and dreams, oftentimes they come true. But oftentimes they do not. But when they do not, let us not become bitter. And let us not lose hope. But let us remember Ruth and how God worked through her disappointment, worked through her disillusionment, but to bring forth a forefather to the hope of the world, Jesus Christ. His best always means that followers are becoming more conformed. Let me back up, because God promises a lasting hope of what? Forgiven sins. He offers us a lasting hope of eternal life. He offers us a lasting hope of a Spirit-empowered life, hope of victory over sin, hope that knowing whatever happens in this world, whether it matches my roadmap or not, is for the best. His best always means that followers are becoming more conformed to the image of His Son, that people are being reconciled to Him, that families are being restored, and that people are being set free from addictions and other entrapments of this world. His ways are always best, and we have to believe that. We say that oftentimes, but do we really believe it? When the rubber hits the road, when life doesn't turn out the way that we had hoped, do we still believe this? That His ways are best. Even when it hurts and hopes are left unrealized, we can rest in the fact that God is doing something good. Jesus' birth reminds us of this. That eternal hope that we now have because a baby was born 2,000 years ago to take on our sins and give us hope. Hope everlasting. If the Lord allows, we may be able to ask Him about the many detours our lives have taken, each one of us. All of us have detours. All of us have, again, unfulfilled dreams and hopes. And in His graciousness, He may tell us about how this shattered dream led to this good thing happening in us or through us. This unfulfilled hope led to this happening, which led to this person or persons being saved, which led to this, which led to that, which led to this grace, which led to this greater grace, those types of things. Maybe in His graciousness, He will show us these things. And then He may turn to us and ask, would you rather have things been different? Maybe allowing your personal hopes to go forward? Maybe avoiding this event in your life which brought so much pain and hardship. I feel confident that we will say, no, Lord, I now see. Your way was better. Brothers and sisters, let us believe that today. He gives us hope, and He gives us hope eternal. God is working out a plan for His glory and His honor, for our good. And in this life, we're going to have things that hurt. We're going to have really, really, really hard times. But it's in those really hard times, let us cling to the hope of Jesus that says, ultimately, it's going to be okay. Because I'm working through this for your good. I'm working through this. And maybe one day I'll show you how I did it and what I did. And I think at that point we would just stand back with our mouths open and just worship. Just say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for the pain and suffering. Because I see through that pain and suffering what happened. I thought I had a really good plan, but it was nothing in comparison to yours. Let's pray.